Hello, I'm Ketsa. Now that I have reached 100 streams, I thought I would make a summary of my experience. I had no illusions that anyone would watch the streams, and I didn't really bother to have more people here. My goal was simple: to capture and process, at least get used to being in front of the camera. And it is not that big of the deal. So, in summary, my goal is to create a manga by creating 3D locations, characters, using that to make it easier to create the panels with a sketch. Okay, the question at the beginning when I started designing was what software to use for this. Since I studied mechanical engineering, I had lots of experience in 3D CAD software. Over the years, I used Inventor, solidedge, and solidworks. And now what I use in my workplace is catia. Of course, those who knows, if you have learned one, you will able to use the others as well, because the principle is the same for all of them, only their user interfaces differ, which was again annoying for me because I had to relearn what the user interface and the workflow principle in the given application. The only thing that was different was a solid edge, in which you first create the 3D element and then size it. In the others, you create and design the drawing, the 2D, and from that you create the 3D. Okay, it is fair to say that if I use these, which I know, I would have an advantage because I wouldn't have to learn the method. But I already knew that these have disadvantage in both the long and the short term. These are the following things. It is too complicated to use in the student version, and I really didn't want it to download the cracked version either. It wasn't optimized for this. It is more for designing mechanical machine parts. It doesn't have visual design really. It is often crashes even because of a single faulty element. It also has higher system requirements. Overall, it wouldn't be worth working in it. As I started researching, I realized that I had already used Blender, but at the time I thought it was completely useless because the sizing and designing work in it were completely different from the software listed above. But besides being free, I saw that it was designed for exactly what I would need. So I downloaded the latest version and I jumped into learning another piece of software once again. At first, it was all completely unusual, and I got at the point where I could basically use it to create 3D bodies. But there was still a huge problem. I couldn't live alone with my engineering mind. This is the dimensioning of the 3D objects, which is permanent and cannot be undone, and I could only scale them later. For me, I can only imagine this kind of design for creating sketches or full sculpture mode. The fact that I can easily change a given size in a CAD software is completely impossible here. Because for me, the most optimal design is when I can specify the dimensions parametrically and change their proportions uniformly. That's when I discovered this geometry nodes option on YouTube, which at first seemed complicated and incomprehensible to program with my head. But I quickly realized that this is the path I have to follow. Because here, not only is the entire 3D and all its parameters completely under my control, but I can also very easily resize the parts and reuse them to create different objects. I started using GeoNodes, and slowly but surely I got to know what it can do and discovered more and more options. Of course, my knowledge is not 100% yet, but at least I can confidently create what I dreamed in my head. What I can do right now, I search for it. I started using Blender in January, and sometime in March or April, I decided to record the process so that I could broadcast it live. The only big problem I had in Blender 5.0 was that it was not possible to run edges with nodes, but in 5.2 you can. Of course, I had to recreate and optimize a lot of things in the old files because in the new update, loads of nodes doesn't work properly. Today I can use this version with confidence. My other problem is not really a problem, is that I like to spend a lot of time editing small details, which can take a lot of time. But at least I learn a new feature faster and the end result will be nicer. This would have been the summary video I made. Of course, it is not an easy road ahead of me, and I will discover more difficulties as I move forward. But if this is the price, I still have to try. But tell me in the comments what you think of my approach. Thank you for watching the video. If you like it, and tell me what I see wrong.